The cake hit me square in the face. Thick, cold buttercream smearing across my nose and splattering down my blouse. For a second, the room stood still. Forks paused midair. Conversations froze mid-word. I didn't move. I let the frosting drip onto my lap in silence, and then, slowly, I reached up, wiped cream from my eyes, and stood. The chair screeched against the hardwood as I pushed it back. All 22 people at that long dining table. Relatives I hadn't seen in months, some in years, watched me with a mix of surprise, smugness, and in my mother's case, barely concealed satisfaction. She didn't even look guilty, just proud. Well, she said with a shrug, if you're going to be selfish, then expect consequences. Camille looked down at her plate, her hand resting protectively on her barely there bump. Kevin, her fiancé, stared at me like I'd just slapped a baby. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Not in that house. I grabbed my purse with frosting sticky fingers, turned toward the front door, and walked out. Out of that house, out of their games, out of the role I'd played for 30 years. The responsible one. The understanding one. The one who always gave in. Outside, the February wind slapped against my cheeks, but I welcomed it. It reminded me I still existed, that I wasn't just a set piece in someone else's celebration. My heels clicked sharply on the icy steps as I made my way to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes, trembling, not with cold, but with rage and something deeper. A realization. This wasn't about a cake. It wasn't even about Camille's pregnancy. It was about a lifetime of being expected to sacrifice without hesitation. And finally, I had said no. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe you're wondering how things got so ugly, so fast. Maybe you're thinking, there has to be more to the story. And you'd be right. Because just 2 weeks ago, I was still painting the walls of my new apartment, singing off-key to Fleetwood Mac and thinking, naively, that this year was going to be different. I had spent 8 years working toward that apartment. 8 years of sacrificing every luxury, every whim, every vacation and holiday, while my friends were off backpacking through Europe or getting engaged at rooftop bars. I was making spreadsheets for regional audits and clipping coupons to stretch my grocery budget. I wasn't bitter about it, not then. It felt good being disciplined, like I was building something solid in a world full of temporary thrills. The apartment itself wasn't fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a cracked tile entryway, and a kitchen with grout older than I was. But it was mine, fully paid, no mortgage, no roommate drama, just peace and silence and the warm glow of something earned. That peace didn't last long. It was the second Tuesday of February when my phone rang. I remember because I was halfway through scraping off a patch of floral wallpaper that looked like it belonged in a haunted dollhouse. I just dropped my putty knife and wiped a streak of dust from my forehead when I saw the name on the screen. Mom. Something about the way she said my name that day, Natalie, sweetheart, made my stomach tighten. She only used that tone when she wanted something. We're having a little family get-together this Saturday, she said. Nothing big. Just dinner, you know. Camille and Kevin will be there, and your uncles and Aunt Marcy and the cousins. Oh, and could you bring one of those chocolate cakes from that bakery near you? You know, the one with the buttercream frosting. I hesitated. Wait, all of them? What's the occasion? Oh, just a surprise, she said. Her voice was light, too light. Just be here at 4. Sharp. I should have known then. I should have trusted my gut. But I wanted to believe it was something harmless, something normal. I didn't know that 9 days later, I'd walk out of that house with cake on my face and a resolve I never thought I had. The truth is, I didn't buy that apartment for the space or the view or even the independence. I bought it because it was the only thing in my life that no one else could take credit for. Not my parents, not my sister, not anyone. Every cent that went into that down payment came from my own hands. Shaking coffee into mugs during audit season, rebalancing spreadsheets at 10 p.m., saying no to every spontaneous girls' trip or luxury handbag that tempted me during my 20s. When I started saving, I was 22, fresh out of college, working at a mid-sized accounting firm in downtown Denver. My salary was modest, my apartment was barely livable, and my social life was virtually non-existent. But I had a plan. I remember printing out a photo of a 2-bedroom apartment from a real estate blog and taping it to the inside of my closet door. Every time I chose to stay in, pack lunch, or say no to another after-hours hangout, I'd look at that photo and remind myself, one day this will be worth it. Years passed. Promotions came slowly. Raises were incremental. Camille, meanwhile, floated from one creative passion to another. She tried modeling, interior design, even a dog bakery business that lasted 2 months. My parents funded every endeavor. She's just finding her path, they said, as if responsibility was a burden only I needed to bear. They never offered me a dime, not for rent, not for books, not even when I maxed out my credit card after a dental emergency. You're the stable one, Natalie, my dad would say proudly. You'll land on your feet. Maybe he meant it as a compliment, but all I heard was, you don't get help. You don't get softness. You get to carry everyone else. And I did. By the time I turned 30, I had nearly $200,000 saved. Then my grandmother Evelyn passed and everything shifted. She had always been the only family member who treated Camille and me equally. When she died, she left behind a modest inheritance, about $110,000, to be split between us. I remember the look on my mother's face when she found out. Shocked, almost annoyed, as if she thought Camille should have gotten it all. With my half of Grandma Evelyn's gift and my years of savings, I finally had enough. I contacted a realtor. I toured 7 different properties. And then I found it, a second-floor walk-up in Washington Park, 10 minutes from my office, with creaky hardwood floors and terrible wallpaper, but incredible light. The moment I stepped into that space, something in my chest unclenched. I made the offer. I signed the papers. I wired $300,000 without needing a loan. And when the keys dropped into my palm, I stood in the center of the empty living room and laughed. Not the poised, polite chuckle I was known for. This was a full-bellied, tears in my eyes kind of laugh. The kind that only comes after holding your breath for a decade. The next few weeks were chaos, but the good kind. I spent my evenings on YouTube learning how to paint walls, patch holes, and remove decades-old linoleum. I turned my weekends into renovation marathons. My hands were constantly covered in paint. My back ached from crouching over baseboards. But I'd never felt prouder. It wasn't glamorous. I didn't post photos online. I wasn't looking for praise. But every time I peeled off a strip of hideous wallpaper, I imagined shedding another layer of the person I used to be, the one who always said yes, who always sacrificed, who always smiled even when she wanted to scream. And then came the phone call, the one from my mother, the one that should have made alarm bells go off in my head. Instead, I told myself she just missed me. That maybe, just maybe, she wanted to celebrate this milestone with me. I even bought her favorite cake. It was a gray Saturday afternoon when I pulled into my parents' driveway in Aurora. The sky hung low with clouds, and a light mist coated the windshield as I parked between my cousin Trina's SUV and Uncle Mark's ancient pickup. My heart gave a small thump. I hadn't seen this many cars outside my childhood home since Grandma's memorial. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. There was a speck of dried paint in my hair and a tiny nick on my chin from a run-in with a caulking knife. I sighed, ran my fingers through my ponytail, and grabbed the cake box from the passenger seat. The bakery had outdone themselves. Rich chocolate layers, smooth buttercream swirls, and delicate caramel curls on top. Mom's favorite. The box felt heavier than it should have. When I stepped inside, the scent of pot roast and green beans hit me like a wall of nostalgia and dread. "Natalie's here," my mom called from the kitchen, her voice bright and artificial. Within seconds, she appeared, air-kissing my cheek and taking the cake with a performative flourish. "Perfect timing, sweetie. We're just about to sit down." The house looked too perfect. The dining table was covered in a linen cloth, usually reserved for Thanksgiving. Her good china sparkled under the chandelier, and the silverware was arranged with surgical precision. It was a performance, and I'd unknowingly been cast in the lead role. Camille and Kevin were already on the couch, hands clasped like porcelain dolls, their expressions unreadable. I gave them a polite nod and a tight smile. "What's going on?" I asked. Camille just smiled faintly and looked away. The rest of the guests flowed into the dining room, laughter and small talk buzzing like background static. I took my seat beside my cousin Trina, who leaned over and whispered, "Do you know what this is about?" I shook my head. No idea. We passed around mashed potatoes and roasted carrots. I tried to act normal, but the tension curled in my stomach like a fist. Something was coming. Something big. Once everyone had a full plate and the clinking of silverware gave way to murmured conversation. Mom rose from her seat, holding a wine glass like she was about to toast. She tapped it with a spoon. Ting, ting, ting. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I know it's short notice, but we have some wonderful news to share." All eyes turned to Camille. She blushed and looked down. Kevin squeezed her hand. "Our Camille," Mom said proudly, "is expecting. We're going to be grandparents." Cheers erupted around the table. Trina gasped. Aunt Marcy clapped her hands. Someone behind me whistled. I clapped, too, hesitantly but genuinely. "Congratulations, Camille," I said, offering a smile. But Mom wasn't done. Her tone shifted, softening to something more calculated. "And we have one more bit of news. A small request, really." She glanced at Dad, who gave a silent nod, then turned to me. "You know, Natalie recently bought herself a beautiful apartment. Such a big place for just one person, don't you think?" She paused, scanning the room as if gathering allies. "And with Camille starting a family, well, she and Kevin could really use a proper home. Something stable. Something close to us." I felt the blood drain from my face. My fork hovered in midair. Mom smiled. "Natalie, sweetheart, this is your chance to really show what family means to you. Would you consider giving your apartment to Camille and Kevin?" The room fell silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You've already proven you can take care of yourself," Mom continued smoothly. "You're so responsible, so smart. You can find another place. But Camille, well, she's pregnant. She needs security. She needs family." I looked at Camille. She refused to meet my eyes. Kevin stared at his plate. Dad chimed in. "It's just an apartment, Natalie. You're single, no kids. Do you really need all that space?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. A lifetime of being the one who never caused a scene sat like a weight in my throat. Then Aunt Marcy added, "That's such a generous idea. Family should always come first." And in that moment I realized this wasn't a suggestion. It was an ambush. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping across the floor like a warning. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice low but steady. "You're asking me to give away the apartment I spent 8 years saving for? The one I just bought outright, with no help from anyone? You want me to hand it over because Camille got pregnant?" My mother's smile faltered. "Now don't get dramatic, Natalie." "Dramatic?" I echoed. "You just asked me to give away everything I've worked for." Dad leaned forward. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We're a family. Families sacrifice for each other." Funny. That word, sacrifice, it always seemed to mean me. Me giving up. Me shrinking. Me handing things over with a forced smile while Camille drifted through life with a safety net I never had. I looked around the table. The relatives averted their eyes. No one said a word in my defense. "Absolutely not," I said finally. My voice didn't shake. "The answer is no." Camille gasped. Her hand shot to her barely visible belly. "Natalie, please. This isn't just about me. It's about the baby." My jaw clenched. Then maybe you and Kevin should have thought about that before bringing a child into a rental you can't afford. There was an audible gasp. Kevin's face twisted in disbelief. How can you be so heartless? My chest burned. Heartless? You're asking me to give up the one thing I've earned completely on my own. And for what? Because Camille's pregnant? So is half of the cast of Teen Mom. Mom slammed her hand on the table. That's enough. You've always been like this, selfish, cold, unwilling to put others first. You work in a spreadsheet all day and think that makes you better than the rest of us. I stared at her, stunned. This isn't about spreadsheets. This is about boundaries. And I'm done pretending I don't have any. You're unbelievable, Dad muttered, shaking his head. You'd really let your sister struggle while you sit in that big empty apartment alone. I stepped back, grabbing my coat from the chair behind me. Yes, I said simply. Camille burst into tears, loud and theatrical. Kevin wrapped an arm around her, glaring at me as if I'd physically harmed her. The whispers around the table began again. So cold, so materialistic, always the difficult one. Mom stood abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. Her cheeks were red with fury, and then in one horrifying second she grabbed the untouched cake, the one I'd picked up that morning, the one I'd chosen specifically because it was her favorite, and hurled it at me. It hit my face with a dull, sickening thud. Frosting exploded across my cheek, my hair, my coat. Chocolate and cream dripped from my chin. Time froze. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I reached up, wiped a thick swipe of icing from my eyelashes, and looked my mother in the eye. And then I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard her yell, "Selfish girl. After everything we've done for you." Dad's voice joined hers. "You've disgraced this family." Camille sobbed louder, wailing something unintelligible, but I was already at the door. My hands were sticky. My blouse was ruined. My dignity somehow was intact. I got into my car with Frosting still clinging to my collarbone. My hands trembled as I turned the key in the ignition. The silence inside the vehicle was deafening. I didn't even wipe the cake from my face right away. I just sat there, trying to catch up with what had just happened. They had ambushed me, demanded something unthinkable. And when I said no, they retaliated like children denied a toy. And in that surreal, sticky silence, I understood something I should have known a long time ago. They never saw me as a daughter. I was a tool, a resource, a walking checkbook. I didn't cry on the drive home. Not once. I kept both hands on the wheel, even though they were still sticky with frosting, my knuckles white with restraint. The highway lights blurred past me like ghosts, but my mind wasn't on the road. It was replaying every word, every stare, every bite of silence from that dinner table. No one had spoken up. Not one person had said, "This is wrong." I pulled into the parking garage beneath my apartment building and sat there for a while, the engine ticking as it cooled. Finally, I climbed the stairs, unlocked my door, and walked into the apartment I'd poured my soul into. Paint cans still sat in the corner. The drop cloth lay where I'd left it that morning, like the world hadn't shifted. But it had. In the bathroom mirror, I saw the reflection of a woman who no longer recognized herself. Not because of the smudged mascara or the streaks of chocolate across her cheek, but because something had snapped. Quietly, irrevocably, I peeled off my coat, tossed it in the laundry basket, and stepped into the shower fully clothed. Warm water soaked through the frosting, through the shame, through the years. I stood there until the water ran cold, until I could breathe again. When I finally got out, I dried my hair, wrapped myself in an old sweater, and collapsed on the couch. My phone buzzed. Once, then again, then relentlessly. Dozens of texts. I hesitated, then opened them. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. This is about family. Dad, after everything we've done for you. Camille, I can't believe how selfish you are. The baby could have had a home. Kevin, Hope your fancy apartment keeps you warm when you've got no one left. Then came the notification that turned my stomach cold. Marion Green tagged you in a post. I opened Facebook. It breaks my heart to say this, but family isn't always what you hope. My daughter Natalie refused to help her pregnant sister in her time of need, even though she has more than enough. As a mother, I am devastated. Please keep us in your prayers as we try to navigate this painful betrayal. The post had nearly 100 likes already, with comments from cousins, old neighbors, church friends. Unbelievable. I was there. Natalie was cruel. Camille deserves better. Some people don't understand what family means. Pregnant and homeless? That's a new low, Natalie. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a character in a film unravel. I scrolled down, heart thudding, looking for even one voice of reason. There was none. No one asked what had really happened. No one questioned why I should give up a $300,000 home just because my sister got herself pregnant. No one mentioned the cake. And in that silence, deeper than any scream, I remembered. I remembered the summer I was 13 and needed new shoes for a school trip. Mom said we didn't have the money. That same weekend, Camille got a new iPod. I remembered my 16th birthday. My friends came over for pizza and cake in the basement while Camille got a rented venue, balloons, and a brand new car a year later. I remembered coming home from my college graduation to find a note on the fridge. Left early for Camille's show. Congrats! There's leftovers in the fridge. Every time I'd swallowed it, smiled through it, told myself, this is what being the strong one means. They just depend on me more. But now I saw it for what it really was. A pattern, a system, and I'd been trained to play my part. The quiet, capable one. The one who didn't need. Until I did. And when I finally said no, they threw cake in my face. I turned off my phone and set it on the coffee table. The apartment was quiet, warm, safe, and suddenly I wasn't tired. I was angry and clear. They were living in a house that didn't belong to them. A house I owned half of. A fact I'd never thought to use, because I never imagined I'd need to. Until now. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The kind of clarity that doesn't come from sleep, but from finally crossing a line that should have been drawn long ago. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. The damage had been done, and I wasn't interested in apologies typed with trembling thumbs. Instead, I walked over to my filing cabinet, something I'd held onto since my first apartment, back when my office was just a fold-out table in a corner. I flipped through the folders until I found it. Evelyn Green Estate. My grandmother's will, notarized and signed. The original copy she had mailed me before she died. I opened the document and read it again, slowly, though I'd already memorized every word. It was all there in black and white. 50% of the house in Aurora belongs to me. 50% to Camille. No mention of our parents. No provision for them to live there indefinitely. Just a simple, equal split between two granddaughters Evelyn had loved, at least in her mind, equally. I sat back, staring at the paper. That house wasn't theirs. It never had been. They had stayed there out of convenience, out of habit, out of assumption. But now, after everything, I was done being convenient. I pulled out my laptop, searched Real Estate Attorney Denver, and clicked on the first listing with solid reviews. Carter and Bell Legal Services. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. Carter and Bell, this is Sandra, said a calm voice on the line. Hi, said. My voice cracked a little, but I didn't stop. I'd like to speak with someone about property rights. It's urgent. They scheduled me for the same afternoon. I spent the next few hours cleaning the apartment, not out of obligation, but instinct. Movement helped me think. I scrubbed buttercream from the doorknob, threw the soiled blouse in the trash, and made a list of everything I remembered from that dinner. Who was there, what was said the moment my mother launched dessert across the room like a weapon. At exactly 3:15 p.m., I stepped into the law office. It was tucked between a dentist and a yoga studio, unassuming from the outside, but quiet and well-appointed inside. A receptionist offered me coffee. I declined. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Edwin Carter, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s with a no-nonsense tone and a reputation, according to Google, for ruthless efficiency. "Start from the beginning," he said, flipping open a yellow legal pad. I did. I told him everything. How I bought my apartment, how my family tried to take it, how they turned on me when I refused, how they publicly shamed me, and how I had legal ownership of half the house they were still living in like it was theirs. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, took notes, and occasionally raised an eyebrow at some of the more absurd details, like the cake. When I finished, he set down his pen. "Let me be clear," he said. "You are the legal co-owner of that property. You are entitled to either compensation or a sale. Your parents have no legal claim. If you want to pursue this, you absolutely can." "And the process?" I asked. "I'll draft a formal notice of intent to sell your share. Your sister can choose to buy you out at fair market value. If she can't or won't, the property will need to be sold and the proceeds split. If they refuse to cooperate, we file with the court. You'll win." I exhaled slowly. "Do it." He smiled faintly. "Good. We'll send the notice, certified mail. Keep everything in writing from now on. And if your family tries to contact you directly again, especially aggressively, document it." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "I have a 15-minute voice recording. They came to my apartment, yelled through the door, called me names." His eyes lit up. "That's even better." I walked out of that office lighter, but not because someone had solved my problem. No, because for once, I had stopped being the problem solver. I wasn't fixing anyone else's life. I was protecting mine. The line had been crossed. I wasn't going back. 3 days passed in relative silence. I blocked Mom's number, then Dad's, then Camille's. I didn't answer the door unless I'd ordered delivery. I spent my time sanding cabinet doors, updating my resume just in case, and emailing Edwin back and forth about timelines, market value estimates, and certified letters. Then, on the 4th day, just after 5 p.m., I heard it, a pounding on my door. First sharp, then insistent. I froze. For a moment, I hoped it was a neighbor or a package mix-up. But then I heard her voice. "Natalie, open the door. This is ridiculous." My mother. I walked quietly to the door and looked through the peephole. There they were, all 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Camille, and Kevin, standing in the narrow hallway of my apartment building like an angry tribunal. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. But I did one thing. I pulled out my phone and pressed record. "You're going to regret this." Mom shouted, "You're tearing this family apart over some apartment. After everything we've done for you." "You're being selfish, Natalie," Dad added, his voice booming like thunder through the metal door. "You're making your pregnant sister homeless." Camille started crying, loud, theatrical sobs. "You're destroying our lives. I can't believe you're doing this to your own nephew." I kept recording. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. They banged on the door again. Kevin chimed in. "You want to be alone forever, is that it? Bitter and childless in that stupid apartment." My fingers clenched tighter around the phone. Not because the words hurt, but because they didn't. Not anymore. They yelled for nearly 15 minutes. Demands, insults, guilt trips that would have flattened the version of me from 5 years ago. But this time I didn't flinch. I let the silence between us speak louder than their fury. Eventually they gave up. I heard Mom curse under her breath, heard Dad grumble about getting the lawyer involved. Then their footsteps faded. As soon as they left, I emailed the audio file to Edwin. He called me back within the hour. "This is gold," he said. "They just handed us leverage. If they try to stall the sale, this proves they've created a hostile environment. It strengthens your case for forcing a sale through the court, if necessary." "Good," I said quietly. "Let's be ready for that." The next morning, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. There was a new post. Longer, angrier. Some of you have asked for an update. Yes, it's true. Natalie is trying to force us out of our home. The home her sister was raised in. The home her father built with his hands. She's lawyered up, threatening legal action. She doesn't care that Camille is pregnant. She doesn't care about family. Please keep us in your thoughts. The comment section was ablaze. Unreal. That's your child, Marianne. Natalie always was cold. Money changes people. I'd be ashamed to call her my daughter. What kind of person does that to a pregnant woman? I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. What would have been the point? These people weren't interested in truth. They wanted drama. They wanted a villain. And Mom had given them one. That evening, a coworker messaged me privately. Hey, just saw something your mom posted. Are you okay? I typed, I'm fine. Just handling things. Then deleted it. Then typed again. Truth is messier than Facebook. Thanks for checking in. I didn't hear from my parents again for the rest of the week. Camille went silent. The online outrage eventually moved on to someone else's scandal. But something had shifted. They now knew I wouldn't cave. Not this time. The next call I got was from Edwin. His voice was calm, professional, but with a note of satisfaction. Their attorney reached out. They want to mediate. I smiled for the first time in days. Not a big, victorious grin, just a quiet acknowledgement. So they're finally taking me seriously. Monday arrived colder than usual, the kind of chill that clung to your collarbones no matter how tightly you wrapped your coat. I arrived early to Edwin's office, dressed in my best navy blue pantsuit, the same one I wore to annual audits and boardroom presentations. Not to impress them, but to remind myself who I was. Edwin met me in the waiting area with a firm nod. Stay calm. Stay factual. They'll try to spin this as emotional. Don't take the bait. I won't, I said, and I meant it. At exactly 10 a.m., the elevator doors opened, and my parents walked in. Camille followed behind, hand in hand with Kevin. She looked pale. My mother, on the other hand, looked like she was walking into war. Lips pressed tight, eyes burning with blame. My father avoided my gaze entirely. Their lawyer was a younger man, maybe late 30s, with slick hair and the kind of forced smile that said, I've cleaned up worse messes than this. We all sat in the conference room. Edwin began. He laid out the facts, calmly and without embellishment. Miss Green owns 50% of the property in question. That is not disputed. The house cannot be maintained jointly unless both parties agree. My client has chosen to exercise her right to sell or request a buyout at fair market value. Their lawyer spoke next. The sale of the home would cause emotional and logistical hardship. My clients have lived there for over 20 years. They see it as their primary residence. Edwin slid a file across the table. Here is the audio recording of them showing up at my client's apartment, using threatening and manipulative language. And here, he tapped another sheet, is a printout of the public Facebook post made by Marion Green, in which she discloses details of the dispute and invites public judgment. This behavior qualifies as hostile. There was a beat of silence. Then Mom spoke, her voice suddenly soft, almost trembling. Natalie, please. I lost my temper, okay? I shouldn't have thrown the cake. I shouldn't have posted online. But we're family. How can you take us to court like this? I looked her in the eye. You didn't just throw cake, Mom. You threw away the last ounce of respect I had for you. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We said things we didn't mean. But you've always been the strong one. Can't you, just this once, bend for your sister? Camille wiped a tear from her cheek. Whether real or rehearsed, I couldn't tell. I'm about to have a baby, Natalie. Your nephew. Don't you want to be part of that? It hit me then, not just the manipulation, but the entitlement. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. Not really. They still believed this. was about an argument, a misunderstanding. They had no idea they were the reason I no longer saw them as family. "The house will be sold," I said, quietly but firmly. "That's final." Their lawyer tried once more to stall, to renegotiate terms, but Edwin shut it down with surgical precision. The agreement was signed that day. The house would be appraised, listed, and sold. The proceeds, after taxes and fees, would be split between Camille and me. No exceptions, no loopholes. When we stood to leave, my mother brushed past me, her shoulder cold and stiff. My father gave me a single, unreadable glance. Kevin didn't say a word. Camille paused. Her eyes searched mine. "I really thought you'd come through for me," she whispered. "I did," he said. "I came through for myself." As they walked out, Edwin turned to me. "You handled that well." I nodded, but inside my hands are trembling, not with fear, not even with anger anymore, but with release. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen myself. And I wasn't sorry. The sale moved faster than I expected. The market was hot, and the old house, despite its aging shingles and creaky floors, was in a desirable part of Aurora. Within 3 weeks, it was under contract. Another 2, and the closing was final. The proceeds came in just shy of $350,000 after taxes and realtor fees. Camille and I each received a wire transfer of $175,000. Edwin sent me the confirmation, along with a simple message. "Congratulations, you're free." Free. The word echoed inside me as I stared at the transaction on my screen. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about knowing that they couldn't hold it over me anymore, that I wasn't bound to them by guilt, by duty, by the weight of being the responsible one. I wasn't here to make anyone's life easier at the cost of my own. I never saw the inside of that house again, never picked up a single item. Everything I wanted had been gone from there for years, probably since Grandma Evelyn passed. Through Edwin, I learned that Camille had decided to use her share as a down payment on a house with Kevin in Lakewood, a small 3-bedroom with a 30-year mortgage. My parents would be moving in with them indefinitely. They didn't qualify for a mortgage of their own. No savings, no plan, just decades of assuming someone else would always provide. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, or even smug, but mostly I just felt done. I took my own share of the money and sat down with a financial advisor. We diversified: stocks, bonds, REITs. I set aside a small portion for travel. Real travel, not the kind I used to daydream about while eating lunch at my desk. And then I went back to painting, to repairing cabinet hinges, to slowly transforming my apartment into something that reflected not just effort, but identity. 2 months after the mediation, the apartment looked nothing like it had when I moved in. Gone were the outdated fixtures, the sickly beige walls, the chipped baseboards. I installed new flooring myself, darkwood planks that clicked into place like puzzle pieces. I replaced the light fixtures with warm gold accents. I framed photos of places I'd been meaning to visit and hung them in the hallway like promises. There was no housewarming party, no social media tour, no "look at me now" revenge post. Just quiet, just space, just mine. And then one afternoon, while sipping tea on my tiny balcony overlooking the city, my phone buzzed with a message from a mutual friend. Camille had the baby. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Everyone's fine. I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for some flicker of emotion. Sadness, guilt, regret. But nothing came, just the familiar click of distance. I wasn't invited to the baby's shower, or the birth, or the hospital, and that was okay, because I knew what they were telling him, what they'd always told everyone, that I was cold, difficult, the one who said no. Let them. Let him grow up hearing that version of the story. If I had to be the villain in their fairy tale, to finally be the hero in my own life, so be it. Later that night, I opened the small cedar box on my bookshelf, the one with Grandma Evelyn's handwriting still visible on the lid. Inside was an old photo of the two of us. I was 10, she was holding a garden hose and laughing like we'd just discovered water. She always saw me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. "Thank you," I whispered, touching the photo with 2 fingers, "for believing in me when no one else did." Outside, the sky was streaked with gold and rose, the sun dipping below the Denver skyline. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't carrying anything anymore. Not a family's weight, not a role, not a debt, just a future I had finally made room for. 6 months ago, if you'd told me I'd be estranged from my entire family, I would have laughed and said, "Not possible. I'm the glue." That's what they always made me believe, wasn't it? That I held things together, that I kept the peace, that I was the mature one, the selfless one, the dependable fallback when things went wrong. But that was the trap. They made me believe that endurance was love, that obedience was virtue, that silence was strength. But the truth is, strength doesn't come from swallowing injustice. It comes from spitting it out. Since the house sold, I haven't spoken to my mother. Not once. She hasn't apologized. Not for the cake. Not for the post. Not for asking me to give up everything I earned for a sister who's never earned anything on her own. My father? A text, 1 line long, came 3 weeks after the sale. "Hope you're happy now." I didn't reply. Camille never reached out either. I heard, through a friend of a friend, that she and Kevin are struggling to make mortgage payments, that my parents, still unemployed, are arguing with them weekly, that the baby cries all night and no one can agree on who's supposed to get up and deal with it. And that's not schadenfreude. I don't wish them misery. I just no longer offer myself as the cushion beneath it. I go to work. I make dinner for one. I light candles for no reason. I joined a pottery class on Thursday nights. I booked a solo trip to Lisbon for spring. I've started sleeping with the windows open. I keep rosemary and mint growing in tiny clay pots by my kitchen window. My apartment smells like lemon oil and quiet. And when people ask, "Do you miss them?" I tell them this. I miss the idea of them, the version of my family that I spent decades trying to become worthy of. But that family never existed. What existed were expectations, roles, performances, and mine was always to be the provider of peace, no matter how much it cost me. Not anymore. Now, when I think about love, I think about people who don't flinch when you set a boundary, who don't call you cruel for having limits, who don't define family as blood, but as behavior. Because family is not the people who demand that you give until there's nothing left. Family is the people who clap when you keep something for yourself and say, "Finally!" I kept the cedar box with Grandma's handwriting. I kept the deed to my apartment in a fireproof drawer. I kept my name, my dignity, and the knowledge that I didn't burn the bridge they set on fire and told me to walk across it anyway. And I said no. No to being the sacrificial daughter. No to being the one who always folds. No to the belief that love must always hurt. If I ever have a child, biological or otherwise, I'll tell them this story. Not as a tale of vengeance, but of escape. I'll tell them how I built a life with nothing but grit and spreadsheets and long nights of doubt. How I almost gave it all away to be called a good sister. And how I learned that good is not the same as small. I'll tell them that saying no can be the most loving thing you ever do for yourself. And that sometimes when the cake hits your face, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning.
The world keeps turning, and with each turn comes a new story. When one door closes, another opens, leading us into a journey entirely different. Let us set aside the echoes of the tale just past and step together into a new realm where another destiny awaits to be told. And now I invite you to listen to the second story, a path of its own, unrelated to what came before, yet filled with mysteries and surprises meant only for those willing to journey onward with me.
"I don't want you climbing anymore," David said one morning, out of nowhere. I froze, halfway through lacing my boots. "You're not 25. It's time to think about kids." His words landed like a rock slide, unexpected, heavy, and impossible to ignore. I looked up at him, still holding my climbing harness, and tried to read his face. There wasn't anger there, not exactly. Just that calm, patronizing tone he always used when repeating something his mother had said. Elaine had planted the seed. David was only giving it water. That morning was supposed to be a good one. We had just bought tickets to Nepal for the fall. I was leading a kids group at the climbing center that afternoon, and we were planning to celebrate 5 years of marriage that weekend. I had even dyed my hair a new copper shade, bold, bright, and completely me. "You liked this color yesterday," I said carefully. "I still do," he murmured, "but maybe it's time we grew up a little." I laughed it off and kissed his cheek before heading out, but the words followed me all the way to the gym, clinging to me like sweat. Climbing had always been my freedom. Even as a child, I hated being still. I was the girl who scraped her knees and tore her jeans and never sat down when told. Now, in my 30s, I had turned that passion into a career. I ran weekend classes for kids, team building workshops for adults, and had just helped design a new safety system that made national certification. I wasn't just passionate, I was good, and I loved it. Our apartment in Portland reflected our life. Sunlight streaming through big windows, trekking boots in the hallway, a giant map above the bed with red pins for places we'd been and blue for places we still dreamed of. Nepal had 3 blues. I had circled them in pen. That Saturday, I was prepping our signature weekend lunch, vegetable curry with too much ginger, when the doorbell rang. "Can you get that?" I called to David. I was elbow deep in turmeric and laughter. When I turned around, I saw not just our friend Rachel, but also Elaine, standing in the doorway in a beige suit and her usual judgment. I was in the area," she said briskly. "Thought I'd drop by." Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside and scanned our apartment with the cold eye of a home stager. Rachel gave me a sheepish smile. I didn't know she was coming. "It's fine," I said, though the knot in my stomach said otherwise. Over lunch, Elaine criticized everything. My cooking, too spicy, my climbing, dangerous, my career, when will you have real responsibilities? When I mentioned our Nepal trip, she pursed her lips. "You're not getting any younger, Julia. It's time to think about a family." I tried to stay calm. "We have a plan, Elaine. Nepal in the fall, maybe kids next year." She gave David a look, the kind that didn't need words. I saw the way he shifted uncomfortably, the way he didn't defend me. "You've got too many mountains on your list and not enough sense of time," she muttered under her breath, slicing her naan-bread like it had personally offended her. Later that night, I sat with David on the couch, our knees touching, the TV glowing softly. "She doesn't think I'll ever give you children," I said. He sighed. "She's from another time. For her, a woman's worth is domestic." I nodded slowly. "You don't believe that, right?" "Of course not," he said, kissing the top of my head. But even then, I wasn't sure if he said it for me or for himself. 2 days later, at the climbing gym, a new father joined our adult class. Nervous, stiff, out of shape. I clipped him in and smiled. "You'll be fine. Most of climbing is just trusting the rope." The class was going well, laughter echoing through the high ceilings, music playing in the background. One of the girls shouted down to me, "Coach Julia, watch this." That's when it happened. A sound, small and sharp, like a zipper tearing open. The rope snapped, not fully, but enough. The man lost his footing. I saw it all happen in slow motion. His body falling, spinning. I moved without thinking. Lunged forward. Caught the rope. Tried to break the fall. But 240 pounds hit me like a freight train. And then everything went black. I woke up to a ceiling I didn't recognize and pain that didn't belong to anything I'd felt before. It wasn't sharp, not exactly. It was hollow, like something inside me had gone missing. My mouth was dry. My fingers were cold. Machines beeped softly around me. The lights were too bright. Someone held my hand, warm and trembling. "Julia," a voice whispered. It was David. I turned my head, slowly, like dragging a stone through water. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red. "You're awake. Thank God you're awake." I tried to speak, but my throat burned. He poured water into a straw and lifted my head gently. "Don't try to talk. Just rest. You've been out for 2 days." I blinked at him, trying to anchor myself in time. "What happened?" I finally croaked. His face twisted, like he didn't want to say it out loud. "You took the fall for someone. A student lost his grip, you stepped in. You saved him. But you didn't land well." He hesitated. "Spinal injury. T8 and T9. They're saying it's serious, that mobility may be compromised." I didn't understand, not fully. Compromised? Like what? I wouldn't walk for a few weeks? Use a cane? Then the doctor came in with charts and x-rays, and suddenly the word paralysis hung in the air like a storm cloud. Permanent. Maybe. They didn't know. They always say that. "Too early to tell," they said. "Depends on how your body responds." But in their eyes, I saw the truth. Elaine showed up the next day, perfectly put together, like she was attending a charity event instead of visiting her paralyzed daughter-in-law. She brought a basket of oranges and a stack of lifestyle magazines. "I told you," she said softly to David while she thought I was asleep. "That climbing nonsense would end in disaster." She looked at me like I was already gone. "And now, she won't just not give you children. She'll need to be cared for like one." David said nothing. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes on the floor. I wanted to scream, to throw the basket at her, but I couldn't move, not even my legs. That truth sank in quietly like a fog settling in my bones. The hospital room became my new world. Every beep, every injection, every test reminded me of what I had lost. I wasn't a climber. I wasn't a coach. I was a patient, a burden. David visited every day. He brought me books, playlists, updates from the outside. He tried to smile, but it looked like effort. I watched the light in him dim, one visit at a time. It wasn't his fault. He didn't ask for this. Neither did I, but here we were. I asked one of the nurses to bring in a whiteboard. I drew a mountain on it, Everest, crudely outlined. Then a line under it, flat, unmoving. "This is me now," I said when David came in. He tried to laugh. "No, it's just a different climb." But he didn't believe it, and neither did I. Physical therapy started a week later. They tried to move my legs. I couldn't feel a thing. The therapist smiled too much, like overcompensating for the silence between her words. "You're strong," she said. "You're athletic. That gives you an edge." I smiled back, but I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was being erased one layer at a time. One night, I asked David to play our old playlist, the one we used to hike with. He sat beside me, earbuds in, and Sweet Disposition started playing. I used to sing that song out loud on cliffsides with the wind in my face and dirt on my palms. Now, I just stared at the ceiling, feeling like that version of me had died. "I miss her," I whispered. "Who?" he asked. "The woman I used to be." David didn't respond. He squeezed my hand, but his eyes stayed fixed on the floor. That was the first time I saw the wall forming between us. Invisible, but solid and growing. They brought me home on a Wednesday. Not the same home I remembered, though. Our bright little apartment in Portland, once full of climbing gear and cooking smells and music, had been gutted. The queen-sized bed was gone, replaced by a hospital bed with metal rails and a motorized remote. Tubes, medications, feeding supplements, sterile gloves. There was a commode chair in the corner and a lift device parked by the window. The carpet had been ripped up to make way for the wheels. David had done it all. He'd turned our home into a clinic, and I hated it. The first night, he tried to be upbeat. "We'll get you back on your feet. Just you wait," he said, fluffing my pillow. "This is just the middle chapter." I nodded, but I couldn't meet his eyes. He didn't know what it was like to feel your body but not command it, to lie in bed and need help for the smallest, most humiliating things, to wake up drenched in sweat, unable to move, and too proud to cry. He brought me tea in the mornings adjusted my catheter, learned how to inject meds into the port on my abdomen. I saw him watching videos on how to prevent bed sores, how to do passive stretches for paralyzed legs. He wanted to help. He really did. But with every day that passed, I could feel him breaking. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion. His voice was quieter, more distracted. He didn't laugh anymore, not even at the jokes I made just to cut the silence. He started taking work calls again, then stayed in his office longer. Sometimes he'd sit in the dark, staring at his old architectural drafts, untouched for weeks. I wanted to reach for him, to say, "We're still us." But I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. Elaine came by often, too often, always uninvited, always bringing comments, wrapped in pity. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" she'd ask David, stroking his arm like I wasn't even there. "You're so strong to do this for her." Then she'd glance at me and sigh. "I've been looking into some care facilities just in case. Somewhere professional with trained staff." I smiled through my teeth. "I'm right here, Elaine." "I know, dear," she replied sweetly, "but David needs rest too. You wouldn't want him to burn out, would you?" I wanted to scream, but all I could do was blink. Rachel came by less and less. She was busy, she said. Work was overwhelming. But I knew. I felt the shift. When she did come, she hovered awkwardly, eyes darting between me and David, bringing meals I couldn't chew and flowers I couldn't smell. I thanked her anyway. Some nights, when the painkillers made me drowsy and the room spun with soft hallucinations, I'd hear David on the balcony, whispering into the phone. His voice was low, tight with guilt. I never asked who he was talking to. I didn't want to know. Or maybe I already knew. One night, as he helped adjust my position, I caught his face in the dim lamplight. Hollow cheeks, bloodshot eyes. "You need sleep," I whispered. "You're fading." "I'm fine," he lied. "You're not." He sat beside me, exhaling slowly. "I don't know how to do this, Julia. I love you, but this isn't a life." There it was, the thing I'd been fearing and expecting. "I don't blame you," I said softly, "but please don't pretend. Not with me." He took my hand and kissed it. "We'll figure it out. Maybe we should consider some kind of temporary care, just until you're stronger." "I'm not getting stronger," I said. My voice didn't shake. He looked away. "Let's just talk about it later." But we didn't, because deep down we both knew. Later was already here. I started noticing the absences. Not the big ones. David still came home every night, still brought my meds, still lifted me into my wheelchair each morning. But the small ones, the quiet, vanishing acts. The way he stopped talking during meals. The way his kisses became more like habits than feelings. The way he'd sit beside me but never touch my hand unless I asked. Then came the night I really knew. I had fallen asleep early, exhausted from another session with the home nurse. Around midnight, I woke with a dry throat and reached for the bell, but the hallway light was already on. I heard whispers in the kitchen. I moved as quietly as I could, inching my wheelchair toward the doorway. It was David and Rachel. They weren't touching, but they didn't need to be. Their voices were low, intimate. He was telling her how tired he was, how scared. She murmured something back I couldn't hear. Then he said, "When I'm with you, I can breathe." I backed away before I heard more. The next morning, he brought me breakfast. French toast, slightly burnt, just the way I liked it. I stared at the tray. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. I didn't answer. I looked at the toast, then at him. "You should tell me." He blinked. "Tell you what?" "That it's too much. That I'm too much. That you want out." His shoulders sank. He didn't deny it. He just sat down beside the bed and rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't know how to say it, Julia. I feel like I'm drowning." I nodded. "Me too." There was no shouting, no crying, just a slow silence settling in between us like fog. "Elaine told me about a place," he finally said. "Clearbrook Manor. It's a care facility just outside the city. It's clean, safe, has professional staff. They can help you in ways I can't. You mean you won't? He didn't argue. I'm not angry, I said, surprising even myself. I'm just tired of watching you disappear by inches. He reached for my hand. It's temporary, just until I can breathe again, until we figure things out. I looked down at our hands. When someone says temporary, they usually mean forever, they just can't admit it yet. That night, he packed a small bag for me. I watched from the bed as he folded my shirts, the same ones I used to wear to the climbing gym, the same ones that still smelled faintly of chalk and sun. Rachel came by to say goodbye. She brought flowers again, tulips this time. They'll look nice by the window, she said. I didn't ask which window. I didn't ask if she'd be there when David came home. The ambulance came at noon. David rode with me, held my hand the whole time. When we reached Clearbrook, he wheeled me through the lobby, kissed my forehead, and said he'd be back tomorrow. But tomorrow came and went, and he didn't. The room they gave me was small, sterile. The walls were yellowing. There was a leak in the ceiling that stained the plaster in the shape of a broken heart. No art, no windows facing the sun, just the humming of machines and the echo of footsteps in the hallway. The nurse who checked me in, Valerie, was kind in a distracted sort of way. She adjusted my bed and said, "Don't worry, honey. You'll settle in soon." I smiled weakly, but inside, something had cracked. That first night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks with my eyes, trying to imagine they were mountain ridges. I imagined summits, glaciers, clouds. I tried to breathe in the air of the Himalayas, but all I smelled was bleach. Days blurred. In Clearbrook Manor, time had no texture. The air was thick with antiseptic and something heavier, something like surrender. The food tasted like nothing. The lights flickered at night. The hallway outside my room echoed with coughs, the shuffle of slippers, the slow click of metal walkers. I had become one of them, one of the people who had been set aside. David called it first. Short, tired conversations. How are they treating you? Have you been outside? I'll try to visit this weekend. But the visits never came. The weekends filled with empty promises and excuses. Work is insane right now. I've got a deadline. Next week, I promise. Next week never came. Rachel stopped calling altogether. I tried to be strong. I did my physical therapy. I listened to the nurses. I smiled when spoken to. But inside, I felt myself dissolving. Then came the rash. It started on my arms, red, angry patches. I told Nurse Valerie. She barely looked up from her chart. Probably the laundry soap. The hospital-grade stuff's harsh. She handed me a cream that burned more than it soothed. Let me know if it spreads. It did. By the end of the week, it had crept to my neck and back. I couldn't sleep. The itching was unbearable. The nurse on night shift muttered something about allergic reaction, but made no move to change the bedding or the soap or anything. One night, unable to bear it, I reached into the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the photo I had brought with me, the one of David and me on Mount Hood, grinning at the summit, cheeks red from the cold, arms wrapped around each other. We looked so alive, so invincible. Now, that girl might as well have been a ghost. I don't know what broke me more, the silence from David or the silence inside myself. I didn't even cry anymore. I just existed, like a placeholder in a broken system. Then something shifted. A new doctor arrived. He came in quietly late one morning with a worn leather notebook and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Julia Carter," he asked, checking the name on my chart. "I'm Dr. Ethan Blake. I'm the new neurorehabilitation specialist here. I've reviewed your file," and he paused, then looked directly at me. "I think there's more we can try." I stared at him. More what? Rehabilitation. Advanced methods. Not miracle cures, but effort. Real effort. I'd like to evaluate your reflex responses again. The original notes suggest partial compression, not full severance. I blinked. Everyone said this was it, that I'd never move again. Everyone was wrong, he said simply. It happens. He examined my legs, ran a few tests, scribbled something in his notebook. You still have deep tissue response. That's something. It means the signal's not entirely gone, just quiet. We can work with that. I didn't believe him, but I let him talk. Later that day, he came back. Would you be open to some unofficial sessions? He asked, his voice low. The staff here is limited, but I've worked in advanced facilities. I can do better than what you've been given. I didn't answer right away. Then, finally, yes. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't stare at the ceiling. I stared at my toes, willing them to move. They didn't, but something inside me did. It wasn't hope, not yet. Hope was too fragile, too dangerous, but it was something close. A crack in the wall, a light, barely there, but enough. Dr. Ethan Blake didn't talk to me like I was broken. That alone made him different. He came every afternoon after rounds, still wearing his white coat, sleeves rolled up, notebook in hand. He never knocked, just appeared with a soft, "Hey, Julia," like we were old friends picking up a conversation from yesterday. He asked questions no one else had bothered with. What foods I missed, what songs I used to sing in the car, what I saw when I closed my eyes at night. I told him about the mountains, the feeling of being halfway up a cliff with wind in my face and nothing below but air and silence. I didn't cry when I talked to him. Somehow he made me feel like that girl, the one who could scale granite with her bare hands, was still somewhere in here, waiting. The physical work started slowly. He showed me exercises that looked like nothing. Toe curls, breath pacing, visualizing movement as if I were doing it. Neuroplasticity isn't magic, he said, but it's stubborn. Like you. He brought in a therapist from another clinic. Quiet woman named Marta. She brought resistance bands, soft ankle weights, music from the 80s. For the first time in months, I heard someone laugh in my room. Some days, nothing changed. No twitches, no shifts, no progress. But then, one morning, I felt a faint tingle in my right foot. I stared at it for 5 full minutes before hitting the call button. Valerie came in annoyed. What's wrong? I felt something, I said. She looked unconvinced. Probably just nerve confusion. Phantom sensation happens. But Ethan believed me. He checked my response, ran tests, smiled for real this time. It's not a ghost signal. It's real. Something bloomed in my chest then. Not hope, not yet, but breath. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding mine. We didn't tell anyone at first. It was our secret, a flicker in a dark tunnel. I worked harder. I let them stretch my limbs, even when it hurt. I listened to Ethan talk about nerve bridges and alternate pathways like it was poetry. In those weeks, something else happened. We became friends, real friends. He told me about his daughter, Lily, 5 years old, obsessed with planets and jellyfish. He showed me a photo of her in a sparkly astronaut costume. His face softened every time he mentioned her. I asked if he was married. He said no. It didn't work out. That's all he said. I didn't push. I told him about David. Not everything. Just enough. He didn't comment. He didn't pity me. He just listened. One day, during therapy, I managed to flex my toes. Just for a second. Just the right foot. Marta gasped. Ethan grinned. And I cried. Really cried. Because it was real. Because I was still here. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling like always. But this time, I wasn't tracing the cracks. I was planning, rebuilding, choosing. I whispered into the dark, I'm not done. And for the first time, I believed it. It started with a writing exercise. Ethan said it might help. Put down everything you feel. Don't censor it. Don't try to make it polite. He handed me a journal with a navy blue cover. Write like no one's going to read it. So I did. I wrote about rage. Not just at David, but at everything. The accident, The silence. The nurses who forgot to change my sheets. The way people looked at me like I was already dead. The way I had started to believe them. Then I wrote about David, the boy who once danced with me barefoot in the rain, who memorized every muscle in my back so he could rub the knots out after long climbs, who told me I made him brave. And then the man who left. I didn't hold back. I told the truth, that his absence hurt more than the paralysis, that every time I heard his voice in my head, I wanted to scream, that I hated Rachel more for pretending than for the betrayal itself, that I hated myself for missing him even now. When I finished, I closed the journal and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. That should have been the end of it. Just ink on paper. Just a purge. But 3 days later, I found the letter folded neatly on my bedside tray. The last page of the journal. Typed out. Signed, Julia. Valerie looked sheepish. I found it while changing your linens. I thought maybe it should be read. I stared at her, stunned. You sent this? No, but I left it out. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Embarrassment? Relief? That night, I called Ethan into the room, showed him the letter. He read it quietly, eyes scanning every word, his jaw tight. When he finished, he looked up. It's good. It wasn't meant to be sent. I know, but it should have been. I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. Then, one Thursday morning, a familiar knock came to the door. And there he was, David. His face looked older, thinner. His hair had more gray at the temples. But it was him. He didn't smile, just stood there, holding a small bouquet of grocery store tulips and a folded piece of paper. Can I come in? I nodded. He sat down at the foot of the bed like it was made of glass. I read it. The letter. I said nothing. He took a breath. I was a coward. I know that. I wanted to be strong for you. But I wasn't even strong for myself. Rachel, that was a mistake. All of it. I looked at him carefully. Why are you here? Because I miss you. Because I hate what I did. Because I read that letter and realized I didn't lose you the day of the accident. I lost you the day I stopped trying. Silence fell between us like a blanket. Finally, I spoke. Do you want to fix this? He nodded. If you'll let me. I looked out the window. A bird landed on the ledge, then flew away. I'm not the same woman you left, I said softly. And I won't ever be. I know. I turned back to him. Then don't ask me to come back. Don't ask me to fit into that old version of us. It's gone. He looked wounded. Then what do I do? I handed him the journal. You start here. You read everything. And then maybe you build something new. He held it like it might burn him, but he nodded. And then he left. No promises. No pleas. Just a man holding a truth he had refused to face until now. The first time I stood again, it wasn't dramatic. There was no applause. No swelling music. Just a quiet afternoon in the therapy room. Marta holding a gate belt around my waist. Ethan crouched nearby, watching every muscle in my legs for signs of life. Whenever you're ready, Marta said gently. I closed my eyes, took a breath, pushed down into my heels, and something shifted. My right knee locked, then trembled. My core screamed. My arms gripped the bars until my knuckles went white. But I stood, only for 5 seconds. But I stood. When I sat back down, I wasn't crying. I was laughing, shaking, sweating, laughing like I'd just conquered Everest. Because, in a way, I had. We took it slow from there, step by painful step, muscles reawakening like forgotten seeds under snow. Ethan adjusted my therapy every week. Marta cheered over every inch of forward movement. I fell once, hurt my hip, cried from frustration. But the next day I got back up and walked again. By spring, I could make it from my bed to the window with a walker. By summer, I could cross the garden path with a cane. And one morning, 6 months after the day David left me at Clearbrook, I stood on the front lawn with Ethan and Marta beside me. the sun pouring over my shoulders, and I whispered, "I'm ready." They didn't ask what I meant. They just smiled. I left Clearbrook that afternoon. No one clapped. No farewell party. Just Valerie handing me my discharge papers and muttering, "Didn't think you'd make it." I didn't answer, because I didn't need her to believe in me. I already did. Ethan offered to drive me home. I said yes. He helped load my bags. Quiet, respectful. When we reached the city, he pulled into the lot of a small, second-story walk-up. "This is mine," I told him. "I signed the lease last week." He looked impressed. "No elevators?" "Nope." Stubborn. Always. He carried my things inside, set them gently down, looked around the bare apartment with its blank walls and dusty floors. "It's a good start," he said. "It's mine," I replied. "Every inch of it." Before he left, he paused at the door. "If you ever want company, I'll call you," I said. He nodded, and then, like always, he didn't look away. I spent that first night alone. No machines humming, no nurses checking vitals. Just me, and silence, and strength. The next morning, I brewed coffee, took 3 slow steps toward the window, and opened the blinds. The sun flooded in. My legs ached. My spine protested. But I was standing, barefoot on a new floor in a new life. I wasn't the girl I had been, but I was someone better. Not unbroken, but rebuilt. I didn't plan to see David again. Not out of bitterness. I had made peace with that chapter. But some stories demand a proper ending. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at the community center for a wellness talk Ethan had recommended. Afterward, I wandered into the cafe across the street. I ordered a coffee, black, no sugar, and turned to find a seat. And there he was, sitting by the window, alone. David. He looked up, and for a second he didn't recognize me. I wasn't in a chair anymore. I wasn't pale or frail. I wasn't small. I was standing tall, walking slowly but confidently, with a polished cane in my hand and sunlight on my shoulders. His face froze. "Julia," he said, voice breaking a little. I nodded. David." He stood, knocking his drink slightly. "You look incredible." "I feel incredible." He didn't know what to do with his hands. "I didn't expect." "I know," I said gently. He glanced down at my cane. "You walked in here." "I've walked into a lot of places since Clearbrook." He smiled awkwardly. "I've been following your progress. Ethan mentioned you'd left." I raised an eyebrow. "You still talk to him?" "Not often, but enough to know I'm not the hero in your story." I didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "You were once. Just not at the end." He nodded, shame tightening his jaw. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know I think about it every day." I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the man who had abandoned me in that sterile room, or the boy who once carried me up a snowy ridge. He was just a man, human, flawed, regretful, and I no longer needed his apology to move on. "I forgave you," I said. He blinked. "You did?" "Yes, not for you, for me." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. "Thank you." We stood there for a moment, 2 people tethered by memory but no longer by pain. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photo, me standing at the summit of Angel's Landing, arms wide open, the canyon behind me glowing with golden light. I handed it to him. "I thought you should see this." He stared at it for a long time. "That's incredible," he whispered. "It's real," I said. "Every part of it." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "You did it." "No," I said, stepping back. "I'm still doing it." And then I turned and walked away, out the door, into the sunlight, not looking back, because the story wasn't about what I lost. It was about what I rebuilt.